Now, here's something that took me a while to get into this thick head of mine, and that was when I had failures, it didn't mean that I was a failure. You know, there was some book ideas I wrote back many years ago when I was in my fiction writing phase, and a couple of those books just, when I put them on the Kindle store, they just disappeared into the abyss. No one was interested in them, and it was painful at the time. It was painful because I put time, effort into writing those books, and then when I just watched those books just disappear, I said to myself, Barry, you are such a failure. And that was because I tied myself to the result of the book. Now, when you think about it, if that book was successful, would I look at myself as a success? Would I say, Barry, you are an absolute genius because that book took off? Yeah, I probably would. But isn't it funny that, we tie ourselves to the results of what happens? If it's a success, we think we're the bee's knees. We think we're the greatest thing on the internet. And then when it flops, we tie ourselves to that. Our ego takes a punching and we just get depressed. We call ourselves a failure. But really, whether the book took off or didn't take off was outside my hands. I could write the best book I could, but if the audience wasn't interested in it, if I maybe got them at a bad time, if I maybe wrote in a genre that was just saturated and my book couldn't stand out, well then those were things that were really outside my control. And for me to tie myself to my failure would mean that I would just be moping around thinking I was a complete failure until I tried another experiment that done well, and then I'd call myself a success. But how long would I be waiting for that success to show up before I'd feel good about myself? So what I'd say to you is to dismiss the idea that whatever you do today, if it's a failure, it doesn't mean that you are a failure. It means that you've tried something today with the knowledge you have right now, with the skill you have right now. You've done your very best, you've given it a good shot, but that doesn't mean that you are a failure. Because in a week from now, in a month from now, you could have more experience, you could have a better idea, you could maybe hit an audience at the right time, and then just whatever your book idea, your video, your podcast or whatever, just skyrockets. So you don't know what's going to happen. You just need to try out the ideas, put them out there and see what happens next. But you need to distance yourself from your creation. Your video isn't you. Your book isn't you. You might have put yourself into it, but that is just a kind of a snapshot. It's a Polaroid of where you were at that moment in time. And that's going off on the internet. It'll have a life or it won't have a life, but that's beyond your control. The one thing that you can control today is how you feel about yourself. So if you have an experiment today that you try out and it doesn't work out, that doesn't mean you're a failure. Because when you think about it, you look at scientists who are working in a lab, all the different experiments they do, all the tests they try out, they probably go through failure after failure after failure. Now, do you think all those people in the lab trudge home every evening and say to themselves, I am an absolute failure? No, they don't. Well, they shouldn't anyway. But they probably go back the next day and say, I'm going to try another test. We're going to try doing it this way. We'll put this ingredient in and we'll do this and then we'll see what happens next. So treat what you're doing right now as an experiment. Don't tie yourself to the result. Could be success or it could be a failure. But don't see yourself as a failure because you've had a failure. You're not. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.